We'll now call the Plan Commission of February 14th, 2020.
Hannah here.
Willow here. Kupczynski here.
Lorick here.
David Chair.
Chandler here.
Excellent. Approval of minutes of January 24th, 2023. If everybody'd please take a few moments to look them over. Satisfied, there's no discussion, corrections, errors, or omissions. Motion?
Lorick moves to approve the minutes of January 24th, 2023.
Roll call, beginning with Commissioner Hannah.
Hannah, aye.
Willow, aye. Kupczynski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
David Chai.
Guzikowski, aye.
Chandler abstains.
Will get us to item 4, and that's review and discuss a report on recent common council actions. Carrie, if you would, please.
Council approved the following: an ordinance amending the conditions and restrictions in ordinance number 3037 for a physical and occupational therapy clinic, a behavioral treatment services clinic, indoor recreation facilities, outdoor recreation facilities, a private emergency services facility, and an animal training / therapy facility on the property at 140 East Rawson Avenue. Also approved a contract for design of the first phase of the Drexel Avenue streetscape improvements to Grafe for a total of $165,000. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. That'll get us to review of recent board and housing zoning appeal actions. Carrie?
Board of Housing and Zoning Appeals had one meeting. They had one case, and it was case number 22-0003, which was a request for 10372 South Minority Lane, and that was a variance from section 170414D2, which was for an accessory structure, and the request was for one accessory structure that exceeded 200 square feet. As permitted, accessory structures are allowed a maximum of 100 square feet, or in lieu of having two accessory structures of 100 square feet each, they may have one 200 square foot structure with the approval of the Director of Community Development. They would have still exceeded the 200 square feet. Unfortunately, the Board of Zoning Appeals was not able to rule in favor of the applicant, and the variance was denied. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Item 6 is a review and discussion on the report of the quarterly Parks and Recreation Commission action. That next report is due out March the 28th, which will get us to new business. And item 7A is master sign plan review for a multi-tenant industrial building on the property at 10501 South Oakview Park.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is an existing multi-tenant industrial building within Oakview Business Park, so the current zoning is M1 PUD. The requests are for several wall signs and one monument sign. There will be one wall sign on the north elevation per tenant, and that would be a future tenant. One wall sign on the south elevation for the primary tenant, which is Migrant Glass. And then on the east elevation, there are two signs proposed. One on the southeast corner for Migrant Glass, which is the primary tenant, and then one that is shown as possible additional tenant signage area on the northeast portion of the building. So these are locations highlighted as 2 and 1 on the screen on the site plan. The monument sign is highlighted as 3. There's no concern with the location of the proposed monument sign, height, etc. We would like some clarification as to that future tenant signage on the northeast, whether or not that's intended for the primary tenant or a future tenant, and whether or not the Plan Commission would like to approve of 2 wall signs on a non-entry facade. The number of signs is allowed at the Plan Commission's discretion for a master sign plan. And per code, the maximum allowed square footage per sign is 10% of the wall on which it's placed. each wall sign is proposed to be a maximum of 250 square feet, so that does comply with code. These are the locations. This is the north elevation, showing those two future tenant areas. The two proposed sign locations on the east, this is facing the street, and the proposed wall sign on the south. Now, while the location of the monument sign is not concerning, and there is an approved landscape plan for the site, including for around the monument sign, there are a couple of considerations that the Plan Commission needs to render a decision on. One is with regard to the fact that this proposed monument sign does not meet the code in two areas. One is the base requirement needing to be a minimum of 10% extended from the face of the sign, up to a maximum of 25%. And then the base materials themselves. What's proposed is a fabricated aluminum panel, and code requires masonry stone or other materials that are similar in keeping with the design of the principal building, which is actually concrete tip-up. So there is a suggested motion for the Plan Commission to consider. You'll note that there is one area that is highlighted, and that is a specific area that the Plan Commission would need to make a determination. That states that if the master sign plan does not become fully realized within 12 months, it becomes null and void, and they would have to come back to the Plan Commission, unless the Plan Commission extends that. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the commission, is there anybody who'd like to come up and speak? Come on up. Name and address, please.
Ken Cray, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
We need an address.
North 60 West 38469 Blackhawk Drive, Oconomowoc, Wisconsin.
Great, thank you.
I'm here as just representing the developer. We were the general contractor for the building. They're out of state, and so they asked me to attend in their place.
Okay.
My best to answer in the spirit of what they're looking for. In regards to the monument sign, at this point, they're not intending to put one in. That's only subsequent, only if the tenants so desire it at a future date. And so that's why we put it in there. But I can easily talk to them about changing the requirements to have a 10% offset from the main base and making it a
Okay. Thank you for that input. I guess we'll go right to the commission. Christine, you want to start?
All right, so I have a question to you, Carrie. So you mentioned if the sign, if there is no entry, they wanted a sign there? Yeah, and it sounds confusing to me as well, so.
The
I said
intent-
all of that off mic. I apologize. Essentially, what we're asking for is clarification as to whether or not that northeast tenant or that northeast wall sign is for the primary tenant because there's no entry facade there, or if that's for a future tenant.
That would be for the future tenants.
But also, we just want to make sure that they are clear and there is no confusion between those signs, and they know which the main tenant for which one, business one or two. Okay, all right.
And I guess that's until they're not sure if they're going to have one or possibly two tenants for that future space. And so I guess I'd like to have the option to put both their names on there should there be two tenants.
Okay, all right, thanks.
That's the constraints of the overall square footage allowed for the sign.
Okay, that's it.
Christine? Vaughn?
Nothing for me.
Ashley?
Nothing for me.
Greg?
So for the signs, I'm obviously fine with the primary tenant that's there, and their signs on the south and east, it looks like. And then the two future signs on the north of the building, for two potential future tenants. I must say I'm not a fan of that extra one on the east side of the building, only because that portion of the building would not be where the future tenant is. So I would exclude that, if I needed to give a say on that. And then, thank you for clarifying the monument sign. If there is a monument sign, I think it should meet the code requirements.
Chris?
I agree with everything that Alderman Lord just said.
Okay. Don?
I have no questions at this time.
Okay. Jossie?
I do have a question. Where's the main road for this
On the east.
property?
It's on the east.
Can you identify with your cursor which side? Is that where the 1, 3, and 2 is?
It's, yes.
Okay. And so, is there another road intersecting somewhere there?
No,
I'm just trying to understand the placement of signs in all those locations, just trying to understand that better.
so if we're looking on the screen right here, the red is the outline of the property. Oakview Parkway is kind of a north-south road there. So Oakwood is up here. See my cursor? Then Oakview Parkway comes around and curves down. So the monument sign is proposed to be about approximately here, then two wall signs on this side of the building. However, what I heard is that the north side would possibly have two tenant signs within the 250 square feet, and that would be an exception to anything else that we've allowed in the city. It would be an exception to what would be allowed if this were just a single tenant.
Okay, so just to follow up with the applicant, so could you provide more information on the purpose of the signs that are on the north side? I kind of understand the east side because that's the main road, right? But the north side, that's the part I'm not clear.
The north side would be the primary entrance tenant or tenants. And so the goal would be to put their sign above their entryway on the north side. And then the objective of the signage on the east side is just to help direct their potential client customers.
And what about the south side?
The south is for Migrant Glass. That's the primary tenant
That's
of
the
the building.
primary.
Their office is on that southeast corner.
Okay, so their entrance is on that side as
Yes.
well? Okay, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just one more thing. I will say that I'm still against the additional signage for the possible future tenants on the east side. If there's any type of wayfinding or any identification necessary, I would say a monument sign would be more appropriate than putting it on the side of the building that it's not even occupying.
That would be consistent with the rest of the properties in
Okay.
Oakview Business Park.
Thanks.
Any additional comments before I speak? Greg kind of took the words right out of my mouth. I was looking at that too. It's confusing, and I would go for a second monument sign there to be consistent. Kind of agree with Greg's points all the way around, so I won't belabor it. As far as the monument sign goes, yes, if we can meet code with the concrete base and 10%, yes, ready to go. I know it's funny, additional tenant space, but Greg summed it up really well with another wayfinding side on that north entryway.
And I can't disagree with your position. And if that's what it takes to get this approved, then
Yeah, and even at other monument sites, could shift farther to the south. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, motion.
Clerk moves to approve the master sign plan submitted by Bob Schmidt, Migrant Glass, for the multi-tenant industrial building on the property located at 10501 South Oakview Parkway with the following conditions. Number one, that all relevant code and conditional use permit requirements remain in effect. 2, that the monument sign base is revised to meet code requirements for width and materials. 3, that permits are issued for signs prior to installation. The master sign plan shall become null and void if sign permits associated with all signs included in the master sign plan have not been issued within 12 months of the date of approval, February 14th, 2024. And 4, that all detailed, revised, and finalized plans are submitted in digital format to the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications.
If I
Guzekowski, a second.
If I may, one suggestion, since the Plan Commission is recommending that the sign on the northeast be removed, that be included in the motion.
I will amend the, add a 5th condition to remove the sign on the northeast portion of the building for future tenants.
And just a clarification for staff's purposes, since this is a multi-tenant building and there would not be necessarily all of those signs installed within 12 months, I would recommend that the Plan Commission give about 3 years.
We'll amend it as stated.
Directional sign.
Directional
Language in there,
signs
or is
don't
that-
necessarily need to be part of this, but the monument sign that is proposed in here,
That's okay.
that would be included in this.
Perfect. Thank you.
Got a second, not to make this any messier. I neglected. Fire have any concerns? I'm getting an indication of no. Mike, address-wise, with the monument sign not going in right away? Sorry about that, Mike. I had a note here to ask.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Mike Havey with Fire. So for addressing labels, we rely on that for our dispatch services. The signs are helpful, but it's really the addressing alerts that our EMS system and fire systems rely on for identification. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, we do have a motion and a second. Go to roll call. Roll call. Dawn?
Fairwell, aye. Chinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski,
Voldani, aye.
Chandler, I.
And I.
Thank you very much. That'll get us to item 7B, review plan submitted by Sean Phelan, DTS, for Mixed Use LLC on behalf of Hand and Stone for exterior modifications for the Hand and Stone tenant space at 7978 South Main. The tenant address is actually 7956 South Main. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a location within Drexel Town Square, so it is subject to the General Development Plan and Regulating Plan for DTS. That requires clear glazing zones along street frontages of the buildings, and what we have before us is a building modification for a window covering on the north corner of this corner tenant space. That includes about 250 square feet that would be covered by a proposed graphic. And we will get into what the proposal is, but this is the existing condition. This used to be the tenant space for the performance running outfitters, so this is what it used to look like under that tenant space. This is the proposal. The wall sign, please ignore for these purposes, as that's going through the permitting process as being part of a regular permit. The graphic that is covering the windows is the subject of tonight's review. Per the General Development Plan and Regulating Plan, tinted glazing and opaque glass panels are prohibited except as accents. And the commercial first floor clear glazing requirement is a minimum of 40%, although these buildings were approved by the Plan Commission in 2015. So this is actually a similar request, for those who recall, to Gigi's Cupcakes and Bel Air Cantina in 2017. In each of those cases, the covering was for a smaller window, and it was for screening of back of house operations, so it was very limited. Those two, which are different from this particular location, were facing the interior parking lot. So those are the distinctions, although the review is the same. So staff have a bit of a concern with the window covering because this is facing what is to be a future public space. south of the UW Credit Union that is currently under construction. This is a prominent corner of the building as well. So there are a few options if the Plan Commission wishes to consider this. This is what was proposed and requested by the applicant. Staff requested some alternates, and these are the alternates that have been presented. So if the Plan Commission is comfortable with the proposed window covering, the motion must also incorporate which alternate or which graphic is going to be approved, where the location of the graphic is approved, and also the maximum square footage for said graphic. Now, staff are recommending that if this is going to be approved by the Plan Commission, that a generic graphic be used to avoid any potential advertising. So those are two highlighted areas in the suggested motion on the screen that the Plan Commission must make a determination on. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Hey, we have a very interesting thing going on. Is the applicant with us tonight? No, fortunately. Okay. Guess we'll go right to the commission and take it from there. So, Jocelyn, you want to start on your end?
Surely. I did have questions for the applicant. Start with you, Carrie. Maybe you can help. Can you go back to the slide where you're showing the window as it exists today? So will this covering be for the two windows that we see here?
No, and actually the tenant space is currently under construction interior, so part of the reason for the proposed graphic, which would cover the 250 square feet, so it's basically in between this wall and this pillar, that's the 250 square feet that would be covered. Part of the intention there is to block the interior massage rooms that are currently being built out. There are options other than covering the glass, which include installing shades, as other tenants have chosen to do as well. But that would be the intention for the graphic.
So once again, it's just that first window. Am I understanding that correctly?
A larger bank of windows.
Okay. And then my next question is for the graphic, how opaque will it be?
Completely.
Oh, okay, so you won't be able to see in there at all.
From my understanding,
Okay.
no.
Okay. And then do you have any information on the details with this graphic, why this was chosen versus the
This particular
alternatives?
graphic, I'm not sure. I think this was a preference for the tenant themselves. They are a spa, so I think that they were looking for elements of the spa to incorporate, but I would be speaking for them, and I don't know what their exact intentions were. There is something that was included in your packets that said applied to, I think it's like first surface or something like that. What that means is actually applied to the exterior of the window, and staff have already alerted the consultants that we would not be in support of that. If this were to be approved, it would have to be interior.
And then the alternative proposals, those are recommendations discussed with the applicant?
No, these are provided by the applicant
they
as
provided
alternates for the
those.
Plan Commission to consider.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Don?
Sorry, Carrie, at some point I kind of lost you. The initial proposed screening, the vinyl in the windows. Why are we not liking? Why are we asking for alternatives to that?
We asked for alternatives because this could potentially read as advertising, number one, because it is for a spa, so the elements that are included basically are kind of serving as that additional, if you will, signage, even though it's not signage. Also, this is facing that public space. And what we wanted to have is, the purpose of the clear glazing requirement in the DTS MUPDD is for people to be able to look into these clear glazing areas that are street level. And if those areas are going to be blocked, then we are asking for a more generic option. One, to be sensitive to the area, and two, to be sensitive to the requirements of Drexel Town Square, as well as avoiding that potential for advertising.
That's it for me. Thank you.
Chris?
I'm not really a big fan of any of the designs. I can understand what they're trying to do with trying to make it opaque, but I'm not sure if design is the designs I would pick, especially for the spaces. The route I'd go.
You know, I would have to say that perhaps this one on the bottom corner here may be a bit misleading, because I think the intention here is just for it to look translucent. That may be a little bit more white or stark than it would actually be. There is the possibility of just having a covering that is not opaque necessarily, but kind of mimics the treatment of like spandrel glass, or the look of spandrel glass. I think that's the same kind of material that Gigi's used in their application. I don't unfortunately have that graphic here, but that could be something that the Plan Commission recommends, that if it's going to be completely blank, that it be more of a translucent kind of window tint, if you will.
Well, now that you pointed out that if that last one that you just mentioned, out of all the options, I like that, the one on the lower right-hand corner.
That's my assumption. It could be that the intention is for it to be white-ish, but that my assumption would be that it would be less than entirely white.
Okay.
I agree with Alderman Guzikowski's first statement. I don't like any of these options necessarily. I don't like the idea of having all the windows and then just putting a giant sticker over on top of them. I understand this is we're here for the windows. Is this because it's a massage business, and for privacy of customers, they've now built walls on the inside of the windows?
They've built massage rooms. So interior, what they are doing is actually putting up the structure for the rooms. And there will be, my understanding, I think there's like steel that's going up to form the structure, and then drywall will be applied to it. So this would be kind of blocking that gap between the window and the beginning of the drywall. There is always the option of putting in shades, but this would be this is what has been presented for Plan Commission consideration.
We deny this. Is there, I guess, is the city allowed to require them to put up curtains if we think that's the best bet? Or, for example, I recently saw another business that had walls right in front of the windows, but it was covered with fake greenery or fake grass, and it actually looked pretty nice, I thought. Like, can we require something like that to decorate it versus having a giant sticker that's going to peel off eventually? And the pictures aren't that nice either.
Not sure that you can require a specific window treatment, but I think you can certainly make a recommendation that if you were not to agree to a complete window covering, that you could recommend an alternative option. Like I said, shades are always an option if there's something that can be put in between. I think the problem too is that they have only a couple of inches that they're working with.
Sure.
So it's not like they can necessarily, and I'm speaking for them, I don't like to do that. I'm not sure that they have enough room to put something in between the two to kind of soften it, like you said, to kind of make it more like a window dressing.
Right, and I understand if we can't outright tell them they need to do something. I have pictures I could share, and you can share with the applicant eventually, but it really was just greenery attached to a wall. There was no depth to it, really.
So
It was
almost
fake
like
grass on a whole wall in front of the
Okay.
window, and it actually looked pretty nice. They had was a sign because it did have their business name in the grass, but again, it looked much nicer than this, especially considering that corner of the building is facing the public space, the new credit union that's there. Assuming there's gonna be a lot more foot traffic in this area. So I would be against any of these options, but if the other alternative is to see a white wall inside, or have them put aluminum blinds up, I don't know that we would want that either. So I'd be for some nice curtains, or, like I said, some type of greenery or stone fascia on the wall inside, just to make it look nice.
And nothing from engineering.
Wow.
I completely agree. I remember when the dentist came through and asked to cover that wall, that same exact wall on the opposite side, on the west side of the buildings. We denied it, and we told them to put shades. I saw it today. The entire same area is covered with white shades, and it does not look good. The shades kind of move a little bit, so I mean, it's a complete wall of white, even though we told them that, we didn't want a sticker on it. So we didn't let them do on that side. I also believe that everyone they gave us, maybe except that lower right-hand corner, is an ad. It all says Zen, it kind of lends into their product. I also, I don't know if I'm the one who brought it to your attention, but I saw the construction going in. There's no space. I mean, they have completely covered those walls. So I'm not even sure how they would even get a sticker in. Since I kind of know how you apply those stickers, there's no body that's going to fit in there. So I'm not even sure, what we're discussing. I wish they were here today. I also believe there is on the west side, there's going to be some possible same issues, because I can see the drywall, and the structures going in on the west side.
That we were not aware of, and that was not part of this request. So anything that's covering windows should be brought to the Plan Commission for review and approval. And if the Plan Commission is not comfortable with this and have questions for the applicant and their representatives aren't here to answer them, my recommendation is for the Plan Commission to hold this item.
And that would be, yeah.
I mean, not to force the Plan Commission to have this conversation all over again, but I think it's important for the applicant and their consultants to hear this.
I actually have a couple comments before we vote on this. So it was already approved to give them the permission or leasing that business to be a spa, correct?
Well, a spa is an allowed use.
Okay. So a spa is is private place, right? So it's not meant to be clear and open space that you can see through it. It has to be shaded, not clear like that. You don't want to be walking and see someone sitting on the table and someone giving the massage. So once we give them the okay to have that business there, we kind of indirectly tell them, yes, you can.
Well, there's options for building out the interior space that would not require them to have their their rooms right up against the windows.
These are options, not required.
Well, if you have an interior space, you can actually build them out so that you're not up against the windows. Now, the requirements of the Drexel Town Square General Development Plan and Regulating Plan are still valid regardless of whether or not the use is allowed. So they are still required to adhere to those requirements for clear glazing. And it's up to them to determine how they can do their interior build out while still meeting those requirements.
See, I'm not going to talk on their behalf, but my question to you is when they got the license for that place or renting, I'm not sure if they own it or not. So were they aware of this?
I can't tell you what the tenant was aware of once they signed the lease space. I can tell you that we only become aware of the tenants whenever they come in for a permit.
Okay. So the aldermen have asked for some trees on something up front instead of like making like shaded and not transparent. So the top right shades, I'm going to call it the green, that will actually perform the same way. You have the green leaves, I'm going to call them, or the branches. It actually perform the same way. They are green leaves, and they're going to perform like trees. and they're gonna have the same actions, not action, statement or performance, however you wanna call it. So why not? I'm not asking you. So that's my kind of idea for me to say, no, I'm not going to give it to you just because I want to be transparent. Well, it's a spa. You have to be common sense. I'm just not going to tell you because of we have the Drexel Town Square and there's a credit union across and it's a spa. Well, then I'm telling them to move out
Well,
because
I can tell you that any tenant that comes into Drexel Town Square is subject to the same rules and requirements. So yes, they are allowed, but they are still required to maintain that clear glazing. Their interior build-out is supposed to incorporate all of those requirements of Drexel Town Square. Now, while I agree with you that, the tenant space, is what it is, they could have incorporated their interior build-out in order to meet all the Drexel Town Square requirements. And if they can't do that, that's something that they should have considered. Now, again, we are here making these assumptions and talking about this without having knowledge of what their reactions are to this. But any tenant that comes in here, if it's an allowed use, they're still required to meet the requirements of the design parameters and the general development plan.
and that was something I would like to ask the tenant or the owner, whoever you want to call it, if when you get that a business, leasing it, owning it, whatever that may be, what were the requirement? What were you given? Were you allowed to have it clear? Was that a requirement, or were you given
That
what?
is a requirement at Drexel Town.
So when he got that,
Well, that's between him and the tenant. I don't know or the landlord, what the landlord shared with him.
what if he didn't share it? Then what?
That's between the landlord and him.
So we have no say into this. It's just between them.
Well,
And
we have the say right here, and my recommendation is, first of all, this is really unfortunate, because either the tenant or the landlord should be, number one. We're speculating on too much stuff. Number two, it's in violation of what Drexel is, looking for a variance. They should have known about this, so they could have, as Carrie said, they had the option to incorporate that in their design. They could have bumped that room out 2 feet and made it a storefront.
perfect. Then I would recommend to have also, if it's leased, to have the owner as well, not just the tenant. Or you want to leave this between both? It's up to you.
I don't care who's there, but right now, we got nobody.
Okay.
That doesn't help anybody.
Exactly.
Representation.
We don't
So,
wanna make-
I guess I'll just make my comments. All the designs, actually the first one's probably the brightest and cheeriest. You want to interpret it as advertisement, fine. But I would hold this and they need to get in here. That's my recommendation. And quite frankly, I think they should really look at the interior design, bump this out a couple of feet and make it a storefront. And then you just leave the glass and and drywall the back side and have some friendly statements that say, have a nice day.
Unfortunately, that interior space is already under construction. So whenever we received the interior build-out permit, I will admit that my sign-off for our department was for the use only because there were no plans incorporated. The
Oh.
plans came a month later.
So there, once again, that falls between the tenant and the landlord. And the landlord should know those stipulations. As he's leasing this out, there should be full disclosure on what you can and can't. Fire, anything from you, Mike? You like the rolled up towel or you like the palm leaves?
Good evening again. Uniquely enough, there is an issue I have with the first image. In the advocacy of fire prevention, having an open candle near ordinary combustibles is an image that I think is not good for the community. You might think I'm kind of out there on that, but I think, if we're promoting fire safety, that is not a picture of fire safety. I'll leave it at that.
That's a point.
Valid
That's a valid point.
We can ask them to blow out the candle.
Once again, I really think, we're spinning our wheels here because we're guessing at answers. Again, we're not capable of answering them, nor is
Right.
our staff.
Make a quick comment too.
Sure.
That is the beginning of Drexel Town Square, coming in. is it an opportunity for us to use one of our own images? You know, something promoting the city or the lakefront or something like that too. Maybe that would be an option.
I mean, I appreciate that, but it is their tenant space.
Up with people. Positive saying.
I mean, we do have to be a little bit careful about signage, because this isn't a sign appeal. It isn't a sign recommendation or request. It's a building modification so that we don't have a sign variance situation.
Ain't it?
Like
Make
a
it
mural?
drywall on the inside, because right now you're trying to block out. So, any further discussion? Somebody like to make a motion?
Oldani moves to hold the site and building plan review for proposed building modification and change the clear glazing on the north windows to opaque with a graphic covering.
Hannah seconds.
Roll call, beginning with Ashley.
Krasinski, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Hannah, I.
Grillo, aye.
Okay, that'll get us to 7C. Review site, building, and related plans by Caitlin LaJoy, Brian Builder Corporation, for multi-tenant industrial building on the portions of the property at 7433 South 10th, 7300 South 13th Street. Gary?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This may look a little bit familiar. Plan Commission had actually reviewed these plans and conditionally approved them just prior to Thanksgiving last year. And as part of that staff report, there were concerns that were raised for the wetland fills and the lack of having a DNR permit at the time. DNR has actually issued their approval, and that required some modifications to the site and building that were substantial enough for the Plan Commission to have to review the plans as they were revised. Now, they did result in reduced wetland impacts, so these are the plans that were reviewed by the Plan Commission on November 22nd, and we will see these side by side. But this is before, and this is what's being proposed afterward, having fewer wetland fills, fewer impacts. So this is the two comparisons on the screen right here. On the left is what was conditionally approved, and what is on the right is what's being proposed for tonight. So that resulted in a slight relocation of the building. It is actually shifted slightly south. There's reduced pavement and parking in the northeast corner of the property. The number of parking stalls has been reduced from 132 in the previous plans to 128 in these plans. The number of overall loading dock doors on the north, the north side were reduced. There were 14 in the previous, there are now 11. The trash enclosure that was on the building side on the northeast is now moved across on the parking lot side. And per the fire department requirements, there is an addition of a no parking area on the south side of the north loading dock area. So that's this area on the screen that's kind of in a clouded area. And there are some additional retaining walls that were added for kind of delineating where the building is going to be. There is some grade change there, and for the lack of the wetland fills that had been originally proposed, there is the need for retaining walls in a couple of areas here now. So those are the exterior changes to the building, and for Plan Commission information, now we do have a proposed floor plan and a couple of sections that were included in your reports. We did have a couple of questions with regard to some of the things that are on here, just to ensure that we have all of the code requirements met. And as far as the other changes, we do still have the same staff comments on the landscape plans as previous. As far as the modifications are concerned, this is just on the east elevation that's showing the changes to the loading dock area that were required. And on the screen is a suggested motion for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Is the applicant with us? Would you like to say something? Name and address, please.
Caitlin LaJoy, 3885 North Brookfield Road, Brookfield, Wisconsin 53045. Carrie did a nice job summarizing the submittal. I'm sure you're familiar with it from last year. Really here to answer questions if you have anything.
Thank you. We'll start to my right. Chauncey?
I do have a question in regards to, I believe there were some items that planning identified before that look like they haven't been addressed yet. Can you provide more information about those in regards to landscaping, trees, tree inventory, etc.?
Yeah, so that was an accidental oversight by our landscape architect, but those have been revised. So we will resubmit those.
Okay, thank you.
Is that it? Okay, Don?
No questions at this time.
Chris?
Questions?
Greg?
I have no questions.
No questions.
Don?
Nothing for me.
Dean?
Nothing here.
Okay. Nothing from me. Fire, has everything been addressed to your satisfaction? No, we struggled with the early conceptual plans.
Mike Havey with Fire. Yeah, we were able to make some modifications as far as the turning radiuses and how to address our access and maneuverability through the site, so it is to our satisfaction.
Okay, I have none neither. Small modification, but still a good looking building. With that.
Mr. Mayor, there is one staff
Yeah.
question, and that's with regard to the floor plan, which may still be in a conceptual stage, but there is something called a tank and pit area. We're just asking for clarification on that.
In the
Bottom corner here.
And so that was added for a proposed tenant at this time. That tenant has since walked away from the deal, so it would not be built out at this point.
And we will look for a motion on C.
Clerk moves to approve the site and building plans submitted by Caitlin LaJoy, Breon Building Corporation for a multi-tenant industrial building on portions of the properties at 7433 South 10th Street and 7300 South 13th Street with the following conditions. 1, that all relevant code requirements are in effect. 2, that all conditions of approval from the November 22nd, 2022 approval remain in effect. 3, that all plans are revised to match and incorporate staff comments. And 4, that all revised plans, site building, landscaping, etc. are submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Guzekowski, a second.
Roll call. Greg, start.
Clark, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Oldani, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, I.
Grillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Okay, item 7D, discussion of potential product design, firm concept for design department incorporated, submitted by Patrick Tesloff, Design Department Inc. for the property at 8041 South 13th Street. Carrie, ran out of breath there.
Nope, gonna pass this over to the applicant.
Okay, welcome. We will need your name and address for the record.
Patrick Tetzloff, 6328 Alex Turn, Caledonia, Wisconsin, 53108. And along with me is my business partner, Brian Lettingham.
Brian.
Are you looking for our slide? Okay, no problem.
Now, whatever you brought up caught my attention.
Okay,
Looking forward to this.
yeah, so are we. And you'll have to excuse us too, we're new to this entire process. This is our first commercial building purchase, so if we are lost on some terminology, just be patient. So I prepared a brief overview of our business for the council to just have a little bit better understanding of who we are. You can go ahead and toggle the next slide. So as a high-level overview of why we're here, we have a submitted offer to purchase on the property located at 8041 South 13th Street in Oak Creek. Our plan is to make some renovations, both exterior and interior, to the building and occupy a portion of the primary building. Our target move-in date right now is roughly fall of 2023. We have some flexibility with our current lease, which is in Racine, Wisconsin. So what we are is we're a product development firm. We help our clients move new ideas forward from kind of rough ideas to something a little bit more tangible. Most of our customers are medium to large size businesses that have very capable engineering teams. They have their own internal capacity, but they end up being quite busy, as most people are, just moving their own widget factories, keeping them going. And we step in and provide a complement to their service and help them move forward ideas that are going to be products maybe 2, 3, 5 years down the road. And we absolutely love new product design. Brian and I have been doing this for over 20 years. If you could go to the next slide, please. We're a little weird because we're engineers, so our hearts look a little different. This was not intended for Valentine's Day. This is an accident, so you can go to the next slide. And what we do is we kind of bring these two worlds together. So there's this world of industrial design. These are artists that understand technology and they appreciate how people interface with products. And that world ends up creating some of the stunning looking products that you guys see on the road today. And then there's engineers, problem solvers, and these two worlds are really interesting when you put them together, because what you get out of that is really exciting products that look cool but function well. And this is part of what we do at Design Department, is we bring these two worlds together and we apply that to new products, new product design for our customers. We brought a couple examples here. We have a small team. There's 6 of us. Brian and I are business partners. We own the business, and we have 4 employees that work with us. So a little bit of history. Brian founded the business as a sole proprietor in 2004. We partnered up in 2011. We were friends. We worked together for a company called Outboard Marine Corporation, doing outboard engine design under the Evinrude Johnson brand names. We remained friends, partnered up in 2011. We worked out of home offices and Brian's garage for a number of those years. And in 2017, we got our first space that we leased in downtown Racine. We are directly on Main Street. We have about 6,000 square feet today, about half office, half shop. Our annual revenue is just over $2 million. And we've been growing pretty steadily over the last 6 years or so. And we're a high-tech company, so we're doing things that you might hear about, like additive manufacturing, 3D printing, computer-aided design. We're making 3D models. We're doing simulations. We're sketching. We're rendering. We're doing all of these. We're applying all these different services to help move these ideas forward through a really interesting product development process that I could talk your ear off, but you'd get bored quick. Our primary product, if there's a product, it's intellectual property. We're primarily a professional service firm. We have lots of patents that we are inventors on. Most of that intellectual property is owned by our clients. We get paid for our service. They own the intellectual property when we're done. And we also do make prototypes. So we don't just do things in the virtual environment. We actually make physical prototypes either on our 3D printing equipment, or we source parts from partner businesses, manufacturers, 3D printing suppliers. And this is a really helpful part of our process. We're very passionate about our engineers and designers getting their hands on the things they're designing, because you can only learn so much looking at a computer screen. And once you hold a product or a prototype in your hand, you quickly learn a lot more about what's lacking in your design. It tends to be a very iterative process. We're churning design revisions really fast in our business. Slide. So here's a couple of views of our current office and our current facility. Again, we are located directly on Main Street in downtown Racine, right on the corner of State and Main. We've got, again, about half of our office is office space, and the other half is prototype shop equipment. But you can see the type of prototyping equipment we have looks a little bit more like a desktop printer or a copy machine, and less like a giant piece of manufacturing equipment. You can go to the next slide. Here's examples of some of the 3D printers we have. We also have some, I would call them hobbyist category machines. We have a small lathe, we have a small mill, and we have a small injection molding machine. These are all things that can fit on something about the size of one of these folding tables. So these are not large pieces of equipment. They just help us make prototypes quickly. Speed, our customers come to us primarily because we can move really fast. So if we can make something in-house overnight instead of sending it out and waiting a week or two, it's an advantage for us. The next slide. So list of our clients, about 50% of our business over the years has been in healthcare, medical equipment design, disposable medical products. You can see we've worked with some major companies, including Cardinal Health, which is one of the largest distributors in the US of healthcare products. We've worked with interesting companies like BRP that makes outboard engines, they make boats, they make Can-Am three-wheeled vehicles. We've worked with Eric Buell on some motorcycle concepts, just a wide range. We don't really have a niche industry. We kind of have a niche part of the development cycle that we work in. If you could go to the next slide, please. Here's an example of this is an irrigation pump, a surgical irrigation pump that we designed. This pump was replacing a product that was not only dated in terms of its design aesthetic, but it was very heavy, very expensive to produce. This was about a quarter the weight, a third the cost, and could be operated much more reliably in a surgical setting. And most of these products will take to about as far as you see the image in the lower side of the screen, the lower corner, where we've got a working proof of concept prototype that we then turn over to our customers. They a lot of times will use it to sell the idea, mostly internally, but occasionally we get involved in focus groups. You've seen some of those on TV where there's a group of marketing people behind a two-way mirror and they're watching customers comment on their product. We've been able to participate in some activities like that. Please. This is an endotracheal tube fixation device that we worked on for a company called Hollister. They used to tape ET tubes to patients' faces, and it led to some really bad side effects like a buildup of bacteria inside the patient's mouth, and we helped them optimize this design for pediatric use. You could go to the next slide. This was a concept motorcycle we did for Buell. This started off as just a wild dream of what would a motorcycle look like 20 years from now. And if you go to the next slide, we prototyped that as well, and it went on display at one of the largest auto shows in the world in New Delhi, India. Go to the next slide. We did a second motorcycle for Buell. This was really interesting. It was supposed to be a combination ATV, scooter, dirt bike. The target market was rural India, where they don't also have access to reliable sources of electricity. So this concept included a built-in generator that you could run it, you could power lights, a small refrigerator, maybe help them with some clean water filtration. This is a really interesting concept. This one we built in Brian's garage prior to us getting office space. You can go ahead to the next slide, please. And we've done some simulators. You can skip that one. And then this one here, this is a suction canister. It's used in about every surgery that occurs in the US. They don't usually look like this. This is our design that's patented. They usually look like a bucket with a lid. And this might not seem terribly interesting, but they make so many of these canisters. We're talking in excess of 100 million a year. And we came up with a new design that uses half the plastic and uses a more economical and environmentally friendly plastic. So we're talking about the potential to save tens of millions of pounds of plastic from going into landfills every year. Just trying to give you guys a flavor for what we do. The last slide is one, this is a little bit of a new opportunity. We've been working with a retired Navy SEAL to do design and engineering on a new rifle. He's very passionate about making sure our service people have access to the best weapons, and he's had some great ideas for new designs. And that sort of sparked our interest in this industry as a complement to what we do. We're not going to shift gears and primarily go into this, but we do have an in-process application with the ATF for a Type 7 FFL. But I just wanted to be clear with you guys, the reason we're pursuing that is not that we want to be a manufacturer in the traditional sense. We're going to continue to do what we do, which is design, engineering, prototyping. But because this is a heavily regulated industry, even to be able to make prototypes, we're going to need a license to do that. So just wanted to make sure that was clear. And I think this being a kind of a preliminary review, we just wanted to express our desire to, we're very excited about the opportunity to relocate to Oak Creek. Offers a lot. You guys are growing. My wife and I come down here all the time from Caledonia, but the building that we're looking at could certainly benefit from a facelift. But the location is certainly very attractive to us, and the space, I think, will work well with some remodeling for our business. And we hope you guys will find us a good fit for the community and a good corporate citizen.
Oh, thank you, Patrick. Super interesting. Holy cow. Really, really neat. Carrie, just, they're really a design group, not a manufacturer. Where are we sitting zoning-wise? Manufacturing?
And that's that kind of the question here. It is B4, and this, I think the presentation is fantastic. I think the business is incredibly interesting. The concern, though, is how do we make this fit if this is something that is going to move forward? Because right now, R&D and kind of prototyping, light manufacturing would be the correct zoning district for that. That would require a comprehensive plan amendment, and it would require rezoning, unless there is some way that the Plan Commission feels that we can make this particular type of business allowed in the B4 district. The concern that staff would have would basically be size, really, intensity of the use. No problem with, small scale prototyping, small scale, assembly of kind of working scale models and things like that. Once we start getting into vehicle production and things like that, that's where we get into possibly crossing over into the LM1 district. So again, no issues with the proposed use. It's just a matter of how we make it fit.
Okay. Sir, currently we have a exotic car locator there and a vitamin store?
Yep, there's a vitamin supplement store.
It changes, business, south side, north side, are you taking that?
So our plans at the moment is Apex Motorworks would remain, and the supplement supplement store would remain. We're looking at occupying 2 spaces. One is currently a car wash. It's a detailing business, and the other is a business that applies vinyl wraps to cars. They sort of do aftermarket upgrades to cars, and we would be looking right now. Our plan is to displace them or model those 2 spaces, but maintain the current tenants of Apex and the supplement store.
You'd actually be in one of the
no, we would be in the main building. The main building has 4 individual suites right now. We would be occupying 2.
Okay.
And just as I just wanted to add, I know it's not apples to apples, but we are in a B4 zone in Racine right now. So I know it's not exactly the same, but
I mean, more than welcoming, at least from my point of view. I'd like to see this. I want to see businesses grow. Definitely have the utmost respect for our staff on figuring out what's best. We have to make modification. It has been a challenging property. We do have tenants in there that have been good tenants and abided by all the rules that we set forth. Again, you are correct that has needed an upgrade for a very long time. Location is beautiful, but not so much on the property. So I'll open it up for commissioners. Your impressions. Christine?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Dawn?
I think the building needed a facelift. But I was driving past just the other day and I could see the cars inside. So, I mean, it has come a long way.
Ashley?
I think it's a very interesting concept. I think it'd be great for Oak Creek. I was just figuring out, making sure that it is appropriate for the current
Greg?
Yeah, I agree. The business sounds amazing. Definitely would be welcomed in Oak Creek. The building needs an upgrade. That is a residential neighborhood. And I know it's on 13th Street, but there's a lot of residents that will be very vocal depending on what happens there. I hesitate with the LM1 district. Obviously, you guys are growing, but can't assume that you'll be there forever. To have LM1 in the, it be rezoned to LM1, have the plan for the city changed to LM1, I would worry about what could potentially go in after you left if you did, considering the homes and things that are so close nearby. Now being just the kind of the design and prototype, there's no large deliveries of any solvents or plastics or anything of that nature. Worry about.
No.
Okay.
Everything comes in UPS, just regular stuff.
No loud noises or anything in the process.
Mm-mm.
I mean, so that would be my hope, is that it could fit somehow in the B4 that's already there in any way.
I think we may be looking at a potential for a text amendment because there's currently nothing that's in the B4 district that would allow for R&D and prototyping. Because the LM1 district was really intended for that purpose, but this is kind of smaller scale than the LM1 was anticipating, so it may take staff a little bit in order to figure out exactly how to present something that would incorporate such a use in the B4 district, but I do believe it would require a text amendment and probably, like you said, a conditional use.
Thank you for the input, Gary. Chris?
I think this would be a great business of value. Great come local. Whatever we can do to make it work, that'd be great.
Don?
Yeah, there's no reason to think we wouldn't want them here. Sorry, Racine. But yeah, this hopefully staff can get it figured out, and I think you can tell already you got some supporters here.
Chauncey?
Yeah, it looks and sounds good, so we look forward to coming back for the next time, once we get everything hashed out.
Yeah, I have confidence in our staff. I have a saying, we don't start at no, we can wind up at no, but we start at no. This is interesting, and this is the wave of the future, so, our staff is very good at solving problems. They do. So, but again, very, very interesting. I love to see this kind of stuff go on. We have strong students here, be of interest. Be a great candidate. We do something called a peek behind Oak Creek, where businesses open up and say, look at what we do. And, this is cool.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We do bring in 2 to 3 engineering interns every summer as well from, try to draw from local colleges. So yeah, appreciate the feedback.
Wonderful. So I guess next steps really for you is to stay in touch with Carrie, work through the process, and she'll keep us up to speed here and take it from there. As soon as we can get you in here, as Don said, your loss is our gain.
All right, thank you.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. Oh, that was neat. Next, we will get to item E, review a request to rezone a property at 8950 South 27th to B4 general business with a conditional use for vehicle rentals. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this is the property that is currently occupied with a building and a commercial business, and it is zone B2, and there's a tiny portion of the northeast corner that is in flood fringe. Now, neither the flood fringe district nor the property as a whole are proposed to change, but the conditional use permit and rezone request is essentially to bring this into a B4 district to allow for rental vehicles. And when we say rental vehicles, we're talking about essentially moving trucks, U-Haul type trucks. Again, no changes to the existing retail business, the building, or the site per se. On the screen right now is the concept plan that was provided by the applicant. A little bit hard to read because it is a scan, but The two red boxes are identifying 4 parking areas for the proposed rental vehicles, and then the area on the west side of the building that's identified for an after-hours drop-off box for keys and such. The way that this works is reservations are made online, and if necessary, the current employees of the business, which is called IRAs, would be available to assist customers between 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. for their rental vehicles. They are not proposing to sell any kind of moving materials, no boxes, no tape, no nothing like that that would normally be associated with these types of businesses. The drop box is really for after-hour returns, and the maximum of 4 vehicles was presented by the applicant themselves. So we have a couple of things that we mentioned in the staff report for the Plan Commission to consider. In the zoning district purpose statements in the code, the B2 district is intended to provide for the orderly and attractive grouping at appropriate locations of businesses offering a range of retail products and services, primarily serving adjacent residential neighborhoods. The character, appearance, and operation of any business in the district should be compatible with the surrounding area. This has been the B2 purpose statement, and the property has been in the B2 zoning district since at least 1998, and probably before. It was developed with a restaurant in 2000, and it has been a restaurant/commercial business ever since. Now, the purpose statement of the B4 district is it's intended to provide for the orderly and attractive grouping at appropriate locations along federal, state, and county highway routes of those businesses and services which are logically related to and dependent upon highway traffic, or which are specifically designed to serve the need of such traffic. This being a location on 27th Street would seem to fit that purpose statement. However, we do have some potential conflicts, albeit they may be smaller in nature than in some other locations. Now, this property, when it was developed, was not subject to a 50-foot restriction along 27th Street, but when the certified survey map dividing the property in the early 2000s was presented, WSDOT did institute a 50-foot restriction. That means no development. Since the parking lot for the development or for the restaurant at that time was already there, there was nothing to prevent them from utilizing that. If this were to move forward, however, staff would not recommend that any parking along 27th Street be utilized for parking of the U-Haul trucks. Second, this particular type of use, we would be looking for those vehicles to be parked in a very specific place, that they would be screened and, relatively assured for security. We have noted that we have had concerns raised by the neighborhood over the years for noise on the property, particularly related to one of the former restaurants that were there. We have no control over vehicle noise, and that's basically usual and customary to commercial uses, and especially off of 27th Street. So what we would be concerned with would be inordinate noise, and if we were restricting the number of vehicles, that would help to reduce the amount of noise that would be associated with such a business. The type of business, being a rental vehicle, we looked at where they have been approved in the city. We do realize that there are some that are operating without approvals. However, the ones that are operating with approvals have all been located in the M1 district. Put a little asterisk there. The reason I say that is because most of the time, the U-Haul type rental trucks were associated with self-storage facilities, which were only allowed in the M1 district historically. That's not to say that a code interpretation at the time could have allowed them elsewhere. And in fact, prior to the adoption of our current code, vehicle sales were actually allowed in the B4 district. However, again, all the similar type of rental facilities are in M1 at this time. The conditional use permits that were required for such restricted the number the location and the screening for all of those vehicles as well. So if this were to move forward, staff would be recommending specific prohibitions on storage, similar to any other location. We would be looking for approved parking areas, a maximum number of allowed rental vehicles on the site, screening requirements, hours of operation, and similar type restrictions in the conditions and restrictions. We would also be looking at making sure that that 40 to 50 foot setback that was required in all of the other conditional use permits, which is basically what the parking requirements were for the M1 district at the time, maybe a little bit more, are also adhered to. But that would get at basically identifying specific locations on the property where those trucks would be able to be parked. With that in mind, there are a couple of decision options that the Plan Commission can consider. One is approval of the request in full, which includes a rezone and a conditional use permit for vehicle rental. Two, if you agree that the proposed location is appropriate for the B4 district based on the purpose statement, but not necessarily the conditional use permit, you could choose to rezone the property but not recommend approval of the conditional use permit. Staff is not necessarily making a recommendation there, it is just an option. That would require two motions, two separate motions, two separate votes. The last option is for the Plan Commission to make a no recommendation to the council for approval, but that would require findings on the specific code sections on which you are basing your denial. Similar to every other motion though, it would be made in the affirmative, votes cast in the negative. So those are the options, however the Plan Commission wishes to move forward. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Before I go to commission, applicant want to say anything or just wait on questions? Name and address, sir.
Good evening. It's my first time here. My name is Akil. I do live in Caledonia on 2714 I'm in business 28 years. I'm in Burlington, very proud to be part of Oak Creek now. So have good name in the community. Ira's name after my daughter. And 8950 South 27th Street has enough parking spots. So we talked to Ms. Carey a couple times, and we did mention them that we'll be parking the trucks on the north side of the building, so it's not too much on the main road. We just requested one in the front so people can see, because it's such a big parking lot, so it's easy for them to spot it. But it's up to you guys, what do you think? And here for any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Start off, Christine.
I'm not sure they're questions or comments. I don't really like the idea that they are not monitored and there is no one on site, especially with the safety perspective. So the drop box that take the keys or put up the keys, it's just not a safe approach, I guess. And not just that, you can go online and register or just do the purchase, but anyone can do that. But how can you really check if the one doing that registration is the one really taking the vehicle, and with the license and the person doing it may not be causing any issues from the safety perspective for the neighborhood, especially the resident neighborhood. So
Good points, but we're not really, we're just gonna stick to the rezone right now, not the process. Process is on him.
Okay.
For the rental.
The process for renting the vehicle is, it's an online reservation process, and then, picking up the,
Correct, but what he asked for, whether it's
right, just wanted to clarify that we are rezone and conditional use permit, not just rezone.
Please repeat your comment, Carrie. Could you repeat what you said?
That this is a rezone and a conditional use permit request.
Okay, maybe I'm confused because when that question came, if there's any
Okay,
comment
you
or,
can, you can question the Dropbox, but the process he uses to do it, really not. So just, you know, whatever, when you go to rent a vehicle, whether it's your license or whatever, that's on him.
okay, it was just a,
Because to do it online, whatever he requires, I don't know what the process is. Process, trucks are parked.
okay.
Christine, Dawn?
Yeah, my comments, I'm not sure if we can put that truck up on 27th Street, but I do understand that is a huge parking lot. And I've noticed them there already, and so, I think it's a great opportunity for you, and we'll just figure out how to get it done.
No comments from engineering. No comments from engineering,
Thank you.
other than I do agree with the 50-foot setback, that should be
Greg?
First off, this business is not in my district, but I do know some people that live behind you. Since you've changed over to the liquor store there, I've got nothing but positive response on.
Means a lot to me.
So I do want this to work. I do agree with staff that there shouldn't be a truck parked on 27th Street. I feel like you're not really advertising for U-Haul, even though you are working with them in your rentals, so there's no reason to put a truck out on 27th Street. I do agree that it should be limited and screened and all of that, all of staff's recommendations. Does the limitation that we put on it for vehicles also apply to trailers? Because I know U-Haul rents trailers and vehicle towing equipment.
Right, that would all be within the Plan Commission's purview for the conditional use permit. If it's limited to trucks, that would be the only thing that would be allowed out there would be trucks, not trailers, not any other type of vehicles or equipment.
And it said the max 4 was suggested by the applicant.
That was the request.
Okay. And in your mind, was that 4 vehicles or 4 trailers, vehicles, a combination of all?
Just 4 trucks. I don't want to make it look like a U-Haul hub.
Right,
You
and
know,
that's the
just
concern
want-
that I have.
Since Oak Creek is growing so well, there's units coming everywhere. It will be very easy and convenient for the people to move in that area. So it's, just to answer the question, everything is online done, so we don't have to, everything is screened by them. So it's very easy process. I've been doing U-Haul for last 15 years. It's very simple. It's no rocket science to rent a U-Haul. All the information is feed in the computer by the person who wants to rent it. It's pretty simple. And about the drop box, they just drop the box and the time is done. Everything is online. So for an example, if I am dropping in California, I go to the site, I just say I'm here, this so-and-so time. I punch on my phone, I drop the key and I leave. Simple.
And then I guess the only, if it's a concern, I don't know how much noise there would actually be, especially if the operating hours looked like it was 10 to 5. Maybe if people are returning after hours, I'm pretty sure U-Hauls have beeping mechanism when it's backing up, just to minimize that. There's homes right behind here. Other than that, I don't necessarily have an issue. If we rezone with the conditional use, that conditional use expire?
It's within the Plan Commission's and the Common Council's purview to put in an expiration date on that. So it could be any time frame that you recommend, but staff would not be recommending anything less than a year or 2.
So rezoning to B4, again, like the last business, I don't anticipate going out of business or leaving.
No.
But if we rezone to B4, does that open the door to other things that could pop up here?
Well, yes, it would open the property to any possible use within the B4 district. That's correct.
Other than that,
Thank you, sir.
Chris?
This is my district, and I've not gotten any phone calls, from residents about negative or positive comments. So that's good. I have talked, with the applicant, and we've talked a couple of times, phone tag on the phone, or many of times. And I'm not in favor of this being a big storage lot, so the fact that you're gonna have maximum of 4 vehicles, I could live with that as long as they're screened, so whether it's on the north, on one side of the building,
We'll make sure of that.
something like that. And I agree with the rest of the people, I don't think we should have anything out towards 27th Street.
No problem. We'll do that.
Don?
No comments. Thank you.
Chauncey?
My questions have been answered. Thank you.
Guess I'm in line with the alderman as well. 27th, we don't really need the truck. Proper screening. Greg brought up a good point. I don't know if there's backup alarms on the trucks. Proper screening, and limit of 4. You know, process, again, you described it on the phone. It's been forever since far different, but I think we could live with the deep lot. Any further discussion? Questions?
We have to decide what of the 3 options we're taking.
Yeah, Carrie ran over them. You can, boy, thank you for putting that back up. Approval of the request in full with conditions and restrictions. That would be prepared by our staff for February 28th. Approval of the rezone request only, no conditions. 2 motions. Am I saying this right, Carrie? So far, so good? Yep. And, or just cite your code sections. So,
I would, I guess, just to start, I would say,
Top
do
one?
the top one, do the rezone with the conditions and restrictions right away.
Agreed.
Recommend.
gives us the most. Okay, that will look for a motion.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes?
I'm not sure if any members of the public wish to speak. They
Oh.
did not fill out any comment cards, but
I'm sorry. Anybody from the public speak? Fire? Anything? Mike, I keep forgetting you. You're sitting in back like.
Mike Avey, Assistant Chief with Fire. The only thing that I would look at is the vehicles stored next to the building, whether that is some type of hazard. We've seen vehicles that are stored, or if they're parked, or if they may have mechanical issues, if it's not a 24-hour operation. That would be the only concern, is if that they're too close to the building, that there is some distance from a structure, just for a safety standpoint. That's all.
Seeing no further discussion?
Oh, one additional question.
Yes.
Do we have to read the email that we received? We have to read that in, or we're okay?
the email that we received, thank you, was from a resident in the area, not necessarily of the neighborhood immediately adjacent, but basically saying that they had no issues with the particular use, more questions. I will respond to that person and provide answers to their questions following tonight's ruling. But I do not have it in front of me, to be perfectly honest with you. But we do have it on record. We do have it as part of the file.
All right. Anything further? Motion?
Clerk moves to recommend to the Common Council that the property at 8950 South 27th Street be rezoned from B2 Community Business to B4 General Business. No change to FF Flood Fringe District, with the conditional use permit for vehicle rentals after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Plan Commission's review at the next meeting, February 28th, 2023.
Guzekowski, I'll second.
Okay, roll call, beginning with me. Aye.
Guzekowski.
Goldani, aye.
Chandler, aye.
Anna, I.
Grillo, aye.
Chinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye.
I want to thank you, everybody, and seriously looking forward to make this beautiful property, working extremely hard for the neighborhood, and we will do a great job. Will not disappoint anybody. Any questions, anybody, feel free to call me directly. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That will get us to item 7F, another discussion item. We'll be discussing potential upgrades to the residential exterior building material requirements of section 17.0403. This is for discussion only. Carrie, I have to apologize. I told you I was getting back to you. I do have opinions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Okay, we're going to make this a little bit informal, but maybe more of a discussion, kind of feedback gathering, information gathering, fact-finding mission, if you will. Okay, so I feel it necessary to reiterate that we made a code that was as good as we could make it at the time, and we always said that we were going to find issues that we would have to address. Things that we thought would work that maybe didn't work quite so well, things that we thought were clear that maybe weren't so clear, and this is one of those things that kind of possibly we missed, and that is vinyl siding. As was presented in the code that was adopted by the Common Council in March of 2022, vinyl is not allowed anywhere in the city anymore. And as we discussed in September as part of the large update, vinyl was presented and there were some concerns that were raised or questions that still remained from the Plan Commission that did not lead to that being incorporated as an acceptable exterior building material for residential purposes in that update. So where we stand is vinyl is still not allowed anywhere in the city. We have had many concerns raised with that. And while we may not have had a significant amount of building permits that have been affected by this, that's not going to be the case forever. And we have had some. So we are here tonight to kind of get to a point where I understand what the concerns are, I understand what the questions are, I can present to you with a code section that incorporates those things, and maybe we can present this for Common Council approval so that we do have an exterior building materials section that works for everybody. With that in mind, I did send out an email kind of highlighting what some of the concerns were that I saw from the previous meeting, from the conversation that was held in September. I did come up with a few things, and I will be honest, most of the things that you find online with regard to exterior building materials are industry. So you will get wide opinions, and it depends on who it is. You know, you will have some people who say that vinyl is the best thing since sliced bread. And they will give all of the pros for why vinyl is the best building material that you can have. And then you go over to this industry and they'll say, well, actually our building material is the best thing since sliced bread, and we're better than vinyl in everything. So it's a little bit difficult to get objective opinions on these things. And this is where I laugh, because I went to this old house because I thought they might be the most objective option out there to give me kind of someone like me who is not an expert on this stuff, an idea of what we should be looking for possibly. So we've got a couple of questions that we would need to talk about and address. And I am going to bring that up. Just a second. Okay. Here we go. So here are the questions. One, should vinyl siding be allowed on all residential buildings, regardless? Should vinyl siding be allowed on all floors of all residential buildings or on some residential buildings? Should vinyl siding be allowed for additions? Should it be allowed up to a maximum percentage on multifamily residential buildings, similar to what the previous code had? Some of the concerns would be longevity, durability, aesthetic and design, and maintenance concerns, which, again, it's in the research that you can do online. There are considerations. There are some helpful things that I found as well when we're looking at addressing some of those concerns. And that actually gets to the second one, which is installation methods and minimum specification requirements. So one of the questions that was asked was, what was allowed under the previous code? Single-family residential, you are allowed to have wood clapboard, wood shake, vinyl, steel, or aluminum beveled siding, brick, stone, other masonry materials, or similar. That's what you were allowed on single family. And then we get into the mobile home section, which not even necessarily relevant for this conversation right now because those are kind of held to a different manufactured home standard, but we would still have to treat them the same as any other home. Then we get into RD1 and RM1, and those seem to be the two places in the code that were least clear, at least for RD1. So my interpretation of RD1 under the previous code is that vinyl was allowed. But RM1 was subject to the most restrictive, and that was basically stating that they had to fall under the same allowed exterior building materials as commercial and manufacturing, so non-residential, and they had to have at least 65% of the surface of the exterior wall area covered by brick or decorative masonry. That was the previous code. Now, you all had the authority to change that. Technically, that was just for building additions, but whenever people came forward with PUDs particularly, that's when the modification requests came in. I took the liberty of looking at the most recent, and when I say recent, I went back to 2014 to see what the developments were in multifamily that were approved. You may recall Oak Park Place, which was an assisted living, independent living kind of development. They used composite. Forge and Flare, actually all of the buildings in Drexel Town Square, fiber cement, brick, stone, wood products. Azura, which is a memory care facility on Mayhew, fiber cement. Drexel Ridge, fiber cement. The Seasons at Orchard Hills, fiber cement. Hub 13, you get the idea. There were some projects that were presented for Plan Commission review that had incorporated vinyl and were denied. So for instance, the Oaks at 8100 had vinyl that was incorporated into their original design, and the Plan Commission did not approve of that, so it was revised to be the acceptable building materials, the brick, stone, and I think fiber cement. Even coming into Lakeshore Commons, none of those acceptable building materials include vinyl. Now, when we say vinyl, we're really talking about siding. I'm not taking this to the extreme where if somebody wants to put on a vinyl soffit, we're going to deny them. That doesn't make any sense. What we're really talking about is the cladding materials. Now, single-family residential, we've got a mix. We've had some that have come in that have asked for vinyl. A lot of them are actually coming in and asking for fiber cement. Fiber cement right now, approved, no problem. But we do have some vinyl that are coming in. So that's where we are, and that's where I'm asking for your input.
Can I ask one question?
Yes, because I don't know where to go next.
If an existing home resides, can they, by the code, put vinyl?
No. They can repair, they can paint, but if they're going to redo their entire siding, no.
So what type of permit would be required for that? Like, when would planning even have the opportunity to review if somebody was going to be residing their home?
That's a great question that I don't have an answer for. I have to check with inspection as to when they actually require a building permit for something like that. Maintenance and repair, they're not going to, but reciting an entire house, that's a great question that I just don't have an answer for.
So, in the one code section, vinyl was never approved.
Under the previous code, but since 2022, not been allowed. I will say that it's been very difficult for staff to apply that for minor additions and for attached garages and things like that.
For additions, I would like to see the siding, you know, using aluminum.
It's not been that, it's been, there's vinyl on the house and they're proposing
Okay.
vinyl.
And match what you have.
Right, so that's one of the questions is, do we allow that?
Not to open up a can of worms, but, allow about LP.
Well, that's also an option. I mean, we've kind of been taking let me take a step back. The existing code actually says wood or wood products. So LP would technically fall under that wood product. It's kind of an amalgam, it's a composite, but it is still a wood
Okay.
product.
Well, that kind of takes care of that then.
Are you looking for consensus on these questions up here?
Well, I'm looking for more direction. Because the more direction that I have from the Plan Commission, the better the code section that I can present you and the Common Council on, honestly. And even if it's not perfect when we get there, if I have something that's kind of getting at these questions, getting at your concerns right away and with a little bit of modification in between, that's only going to help rather than here's what I think and here's what you guys think that may not be the same.
I'll just state, my impression of vinyl is what I knew 30 years ago, 25 years ago. Quite frankly, I mean, it held up 25, 30 years within my neighborhood. And they're starting to replace that. Quite frankly, it's no better and no worse than probably one of my house, to tell you the truth, which is totally acceptable, but those sorts too. New product may be better. I'm no expert on it. I don't know how you define, if you go by the mill, how thick it is.
Let me just say, thank goodness for this old house, because seriously. I actually found this in a couple of places, but this is actually digestible for somebody who doesn't have any clue. Me. So there is an industry standard, and the American Society of Testing and Materials standard for vinyl is a minimum of 0.035 inches. Now, that is like the bare minimum. What I've read is that the recommendation is to go to at least 0.40 inches, which I guess is actually kind of labeled as contractor grade vinyl. And the higher up you go, the better, and it goes up to about 0.52, 0.55. Somewhere in the middle is kind of like the happy medium of this is a pretty good quality material that is, for residential purposes, that is still fairly affordable. And anything below that, you're getting what you pay for, and anything above that is gravy, you know. You get more benefits for the thickness. You know, they go into other things here, but vinyl is always going to have some level of wear and tear. It's not bulletproof. It's always going to be subject to potential cracking or breaking or weathering or anything like that. The difference is today's vinyl, the pigment is actually built into the entire product, so it's not going to necessarily fade the same way. You don't need to paint it the way that you used to have to do because that pigment is throughout the whole thing rather than just being applied to the surface. Of course, depending on what you get. They're saying in here, like, look for anti-weather protection so that you don't have that much fading, that you don't have the UV issues. Anywhere you are, depending on what it is, there's going to be pros and cons to vinyl. One of the pros is going to be cost, of course. There is durability and longevity with it because these products, as you said, Mayor, they have actually improved. But they're still going to be subject to cracking. They're still going to be subject to denting. They're still going to be subject to, if you have to repair something, you're actually looking at replacing. You can't just take a piece out. You have to take off the whole length of siding, which may end up, if you just got one and it's been on there for a while, you put a new one on, it's not going to be the same color as the rest of it. So, I mean, it's those kinds of things that are still going to be prevalent, and I'm not going to get into the he said, she said that I read online about the environmental impacts because, again, you go to one industry and they say that their product is better environmentally than any other product, and every product says the same thing. So, and there is something in here about installation as well. And that's a big thing. Installation and maintenance are going to be some of the biggest issues for any product that you have here. So whether it's vinyl, whether it's brick, whether it's fiber cement, if you don't take care of it, it's not going to hold up. It's not going to look good. If it's not installed properly, you're going to end up with problems. So those are all considerations.
Okay, thanks, Carrie. At this time,
I actually have
Christine,
I have a question. Out of curiosity, what other I don't want to say cities, villages, other municipalities around us, what is their thought? How do they approach that? City of Racine, Caledonia, Brookfield.
Vinyl's everywhere. I don't know how they apply it to specific residential buildings, but I mean, you just drive around everywhere and you can see vinyl on residential homes.
I'm talking from the permitting side. I'm sure they have investigated it. They have an approach that we can use as a guide. I'm not saying we can use to approve or disapprove. So it's just as a guide what they have done, just out of curiosity.
I don't know what the surrounding municipalities have done. All I know is that, you know, if we were to prohibit vinyl, we would probably be the only one to prohibit vinyl.
Okay.
Until you go down to Illinois. Illinois, that in some of the suburbs there, that might actually be acceptable down there. You see a lot of brick homes in Illinois. Not here. Here you see a lot of vinyl. So I would imagine that it, like I said, unless you're in a specific neighborhood, you have an HOA or something like that, you're probably going to see vinyl everywhere in some way, shape, or form.
I agree with you. Vinyl doesn't look good after a long time. Maintenance is easier or cheaper, I should say, but over a long time, it's just Oak Creek is in general, it's not gonna be. What is the right word I'm looking for? Appealing. Like if you have concrete or if you have wood or something from that sort, at least from my personal perspective. So I agree vinyl is not appealing, but it's cheap at the same time.
Yep. And, you know, there have been advancements that have been made in the product that make it a little bit more durable, a little bit better.
And aesthetic too.
They do have wood grain patterns that you can get in vinyl now. You can use vinyl shakes. You can have vinyl this, that, and the other. I mean, there's no limit to the amount of vinyl products that are out there. The quality, the durability, the installation methods are really key. Those are the things that are going to make those longevity type issues go away.
Maintenance is cheaper too.
And maintenance can be cheaper, yes. And you know, if we're trying to encourage affordable housing, I guess that's kind of a hot topic, but if we're trying to encourage housing that is more in line with what people make, having more options available to builders in order to achieve that type of housing product is only going to make that goal more achievable.
I would find it hard to, if I was a homeowner and I I had vinyl siding and I was gonna replace it all to make it look better or make an addition, and then all of a sudden, nope, you can't do that. I mean, I think that is crazy. That I would have to now put wood all over my house, or, I would assume then people won't fix it or replace it, for things like that. Of course, encouraging new homes to have a higher standard would be great, but, I just think we have to add it in there at some point, add it back into the code.
Yeah, I agree. Vinyl should be in there as an option. Like anything, it comes down to maintenance, right? I mean, there's cedar homes that stuff falling off, woodpeckers getting through, whatever it may be. I mean, at the end of the day, it comes down to maintenance, and vinyl is something that should be included as an option.
I agree with Dawn. I have a vinyl house. As it eventually will deteriorate, I'm not going to cover with masonry. I can't cover my whole house with masonry. It's going to have to be replaced with vinyl at some point, or painted, or another economical option. So I would, before putting it back in, that it's allowed. I wouldn't limit it to any certain floors in single-family residential. I feel that there's no issue holding larger multifamily developments to a higher standard and not allowing it, or at most allowing it for some type of accent. But I know we've denied the previous ones, and all the developments have still come in and found ways around it to do that. So I don't see an issue with not allowing it on multifamily, but allowing it on single family. I have no comment on the longevity or the installation methods, because I'm not familiar with the installation methods.
Right, Greg? Chris?
I think, yes, vinyl should be acceptable.
Yeah. Don?
Yeah, I guess I'm not as repulsed by vinyl as some people, but you know what Greg said, I think almost everything he said I agree with. I like the idea of the single you don't want to give people reasons not to update their home. And if you you keep vinyl away, a couple of commissioners already said you might just not do it. So fresh vinyl is a heck of a lot better than just leaving a dilapidated wood or whatever you got. So I think there's a lot of different options you can go with all these. If you want to hold, like Greg said, he said it great, multifamily to a little higher standard, I'm okay with that. I'm pretty flexible on this. Should be in there somewhere, though.
Jossie?
I do have a couple questions or comments. So I do not recall, and you may have said this, Carrie, what was the reasoning that we took vinyl out?
I don't know. I don't know if it was just an oversight. I don't know if there was a conversation where the consultant thought that we didn't want to include it. I don't remember if we had a concern about it. I honestly don't know when or why it got taken out.
Okay. And I'm kind of in agreement with the comments on including it for residential as well as the other property. Yet, is it possible, similar to how we had someone come in to kind of go over the brick? We had the same discussion about the brick. Should it be 4 inches, 3 inches? I think it's even less inches now, certain bricks that someone came in and kind of gave us an overview of the differences in the brick.
Yeah.
So that we could better understand.
I think the challenge with that is the brick standard was a little bit different because we were just looking for guidance on a dimension. We weren't looking for guidance on whether or not brick should be allowed. If we were to bring in an industry person for vinyl and ask them kind of the same questions about, well, should this be allowed? Where should it be allowed? What kind should be allowed? What do you recommend? Blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a sales pitch to some extent. And my concern would be that we would get somebody who's just essentially telling us all the great things about vinyl, but not really giving us the information that we were requiring. Again, this is just my assumption. We could probably get somebody who's more independent than I'm giving them credit for, but based on what I'm reading online, you get somebody who installs vinyl and they're just gonna tell you, oh yeah, anything's great. It works great. The products have improved over the years, blah, 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 blah. It's cheap, there's low maintenance, there's no reason not to do it. If we're looking for more guidance on, yes, but I'm not sure we're gonna get it from anybody who's gonna come in from the industry. And I don't know that we could call in an architect because they're gonna give you the pros of using any material that they work with. I just don't have a real good feel for somebody who would be a true independent expert. So,
Does that kind of go back to checking out the different surrounding cities? Because maybe they've done this research already and we can connect with them.
I don't know that they have, to be honest, because I think
Okay.
people just allow vinyl.
Okay.
I mean, the fact that we're having this conversation is more a result of we realized that we excluded something that maybe we shouldn't have. And now we're having the opportunity to say, well, is there a standard? Is there something that we should be looking at incorporating other than just allowing blanket, yes, vinyl is allowed? I mean, it's an opportunity, but it's also a bit of a burden because, it's on us to figure that out.
Can that be done case by case?
No.
It could be included, but
There's no way to do it case by case. We have to have some kind of standard to apply to everybody. Otherwise, it's having more rule books for everybody.
no, I agree. I'm just thinking.
Yeah.
So I guess all you commissioners away from my left to my right, and I do agree with you. I think Greg summed it up really well. I think somewhere we have to allow it in. I think the one thing I'd add on residential homes is the engineering standard has to meet that minimum. Big difference between that thing being.
I mean, not to interrupt you, Mayor, but the ASTM standard is not the commercial grade standard.
No, I would beef it up.
But the commercial grade standard is what I'm trying to say is that the ASTM,
Commercial
that standard is actually lower than commercial grade.
Oh,
So, yeah.
I would take I'm just assuming thicker is better.
Yes, there are advantages as you go up in
Yep.
thickness.
So, I mean, I would leave that, I would, consult with our engineers, particularly our
I can
and-
try. I'm not sure that they're gonna be able to give you an answer on that.
No, but I guess just on what that mill should be.
Well, Mike left. There is also an advantage, the higher up in the thickness that you go, my understanding is you also get more fire protection. You get more insulation, you get,
And I think
incrementally more.
I would go that route. I know it would probably add to the cost, but then maybe if the cost is there, you'd make the choice between that and composite,
I-
something along those lines.
Yeah.
So that would be mine. Could hold it, like as Greg said, multifamily, little higher standard. If we wanted to do a case by case on accents, I know we denied it, but depending on the grade of it, just like anything, as Commissioner Chandler said, they come in with their brick and we take a look at that.
Yeah, I think the standard for the brick veneer, it's 3 inches on the ground level and you can do,
And a half up.
no, it's an inch. No
It's an
less than an
inch?
inch on upper floors.
So, again, if we're looking at that, basically putting up paneling.
So
I mean,
well, I mean, that's no different than brick. I mean, we
Yeah.
specify as minimum thickness, but
I'm
I
just
don't,
saying
y-
to what Don is saying, hearing,
kind of prohibit that by adding extra cost.
Understood, but again, the industry standard from 30 years ago, just say, is not necessarily going to be the same as now. So you may not be getting a like for like, but that's a good point. This this other resource that I found, here's where I got it. The builder's grade is they say 4 millimeter, 0.4 millimeter. Thin residential grade, they have the 0.42. Standard residential grade, they have the 0.44, and then it just goes up to what they call premium grade, which is between 0.52 and 0.55.
I guess I'd be looking at, in my mind.
The highest? The kind of middle ground here would be the standard at 0.44. Yeah, that's.
So, but I definitely would put a standard to it. So, you know, you're just not walking into one of the big box stores and going,
Oh, that looks good. It's
cheap,
vinyl.
cheaper, cheapest. Particularly if people are putting some lips. I don't think it makes a difference, because then you're gonna have two different grades out there. I think I would just, me personally, I would just say, here it is. There's one set of rules.
Quick question, and it's indirectly linked to this discussion. Can you remind me, Carrie, how we handled the fence scenario? Because this is kind of, sounds similar, that we're saying no link fences, or you had to have a certain type of fence, but there were certain requirements.
So you
around
can
it.
only have vinyl coated chain link fence in the rear and side yards. And you can't have that in a street facing yard. So, I mean,
And not for any new development.
no, it's just the fencing requirement. So new or old, replacement or not, you're held to this standard.
So, I think the consensus is we have to allow vinyl in residential homes. We gotta figure out the standard. And we'll keep the multifamily to a higher grade.
So I question with regard to which types of residential. I know I'm understanding everybody saying some kind of limitations or higher standards for multifamily. How do we define multifamily? Because we do have different
We
categories
do,
right now.
And to me, I'm thinking 4 family and above.
We'll bring up the code so maybe everybody has.
So put
them.
it this way. Here, where do they start to sprinkle homes? 4 family and above, correct? State code?
Testing my memory.
So if it requires sprinklers, that's where the vinyl stops.
Well, here are our categories for residential. Community living, which we have to treat the same as single family. So that's just what it is. We have multifamily dwellings that are 9+ units, so that's kind of like your typical multifamily. But then we have these multifamily, they're called single-family attached, 1-story and up to 4 dwelling units, or dwelling single-family attached, 2 stories and or 5+ dwelling units. So this, excuse me, this is where we're kind of drawing a delineation between your typical multifamily residential and your townhouse, essentially. So I don't want to use an example, but in this case, if we had 4 dwelling units, a quad, that was single story, would we apply the same residential standards to that as we would for a regular single family or a duplex?
With proportions,
Okay. So-
in my opinion.
So once we start getting beyond the triplex, Maybe I'm making this a little bit more difficult, but bear with me. Because we have different zoning categories, because there was a particular type of development that was proposed to come in that we supported, but we didn't have a good category for it, and it wasn't feeling like multifamily at the time. So what we were allowing for was a single-family attached, single-story up to 4 dwelling units. So basically like a side-by-side only in 4. That's a permitted use. If you wanted to have a single-family attached that was 2 stories, so like a townhouse, or if you wanted to have, or if you wanted to have 5 of those or more, single story or dual story, that was getting into another category that also was separate from your traditional multifamily, because it was basically allowing for your row houses.
Well, I
That's where do you
guess
stop?
you need, I would go for a on the front
Okay.
percentage, like model. We didn't do it. In retrospect, I wish we did. At least on the front.
Okay. Like full masonry or just a
No,
base?
Just base.
But I mean full wall or just the base?
Oh, just the base,
Just
like
the
the belt
base.
line
Okay,
to break it up.
okay. So if I'm understanding correctly, single family, 2 family, vinyl. We're just, whatever it ends up being, allowed to have vinyl. Once you get into a single family attached that falls into these other 2 categories, then we require the base. And then when you get into the multifamily categories, you're held to a higher standard, and we'll have to figure out what that is.
That would be my
Okay.
suggestion.
The single family with the attached, what is that again?
So we have, if you have 4 units that are attached in a single-story
I see,
structure,
I see, okay.
or if you have 5 or more units in any configuration, or if you have attached in 2 stories, like a townhouse or a row home. This was really intended not to get at a rental structure, but more at like brownstones and townhouses and things like that are ownership product, but we can't regulate ownership. So it does kind of get us into this, is it multifamily, is it not multifamily? And in hindsight, we were trying to get this.
So how is this different than condos?
Because condos can be anything almost now. You know, I think I read somewhere that now there's legislation, or I don't know if it affects us specifically, but there was a court case where an apartment wanted to turn into condos, and they went through the process, and I believe that they were required to allow them to become condos. So, condo
Well-
can be almost anything now.
So I think maybe we should consider that in case if it happens or no.
Well, in that case, I mean, if it's a multifamily building, once we get into a PUD situation, you can set the rules. So,
Okay.
Mine, vinyl's really just plastic. Most of our cars are made of plastic.
well, in fiber cement, some of those products, like the LP product, I know this isn't correct, but it's basically like press board covered in plastic.
I think we're gonna be flying pretty soon. The
So,
chip in your head.
okay. Was that direction enough?
Well,
Do you have more?
I think I'm okay. Does anybody have any concerns about how this would really look? I mean, like I said, all of the recent developments going back to 2015, they've all incorporated fiber cement. None of them have vinyl. If you want to look at vinyl, you're looking at older.
Gary, if this is really such a tough one, what about consulting with somebody. And we used, I don't remember the company's name we used when we did the whole rezoning and all that, or not the rezoning, the,
Comprehensive.
yeah. Why not consult with them?
Because they wrote the code for us. And it, I had a follow-up with our consultant from HLA. She asked how things were going, how the code was, you know, being implemented, what are the concerns, what have you run into, blah, 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 blah. We could ask them to give us an opinion, but we'd pay for it. And I'm not
We're
saying it's,
just, we could get this all wrong, and you know what I mean. We at the end, oh yeah, that sounds good, and oh yeah, all right, and then like 2 years later, we're like, holy cow, we really screwed that up.
I mean, we could go that route. It might delay this.
It's a double-edged sword, as Juan said. You got vinyl on your house, I brought it too. Cost is prohibitive, then you just go, I ain't gonna fix it, and then your neighborhood's.
You know, it's an option, Don, and it's not a bad idea. I'm not trying to say that. I'm trying to. Some of it is time, some of it is money. I don't think it would necessarily be all that prohibitively expensive, but I can't just go to them and ask them to do this. I'd have to get permission from other places. And even then, they're going to come at us and say, well, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? What are you hoping to find? If we just go, I don't know, that doesn't really give them much direction either. Even if I try and kind of synthesize the conversation that we've had tonight, they may say, well, are you looking to do this? Are you looking to have standards? Do you want this? Are you going for a specific look? And I don't think that's what we're looking for. I think what we're looking for is basically what we're trying to do right here, right now.
So can we get public hearing, public feedback, public information?
Public wants final.
Is it part of the process to kind of get the public input in how we process?
I mean, as part of the public,
Isn't it?
this is public right now. It's not noticed, but because it affects the entire city,
But it's
any
part of the
conversation that
taxes.
we have on zoning code updates or text amendments or anything like that, I mean, yes, the public is invited to provide their opinions. They were invited to provide their opinions on the code before we adopted it. They were invited at multiple steps to provide their comments whenever we were going through the updates. I mean, they're always invited to provide comments.
So how would we're invited to make comments on this one, I guess?
Well, this is just a discussion item.
I'm just saying in the future when we're gonna be making discussion, how is this public hearing, how they're gonna be
It's-
notified of it?
It's published on the website, it's published on social media, it's published as part of the council packets whenever it goes to council. It's not an invitation that's sent to any particular household because it affects the entire city,
Okay.
but it's available in multiple places.
Okay.
Have we gotten how many builders coming in with small houses that had vinyl and you had to say
Small houses, no.
no? Big houses?
Big houses, yes.
And you had to say, no, we don't do that anymore?
Yes.
Did they go somewhere else?
No, in some cases, it was updated to fiber cement. Or composite.
I know, I mean,
I-
nobody's
I-
building small houses right now.
I think
right, right.
we gotta allow it, and like I say, just put a standard to it. And I think we got a basis where we're going with multifamily as well.
Sorry?
With a percentage of brick veneer.
But the multifamily is a little bit more difficult because what do you want? I mean, what's the
True.
percentage? How much of
True,
what?
it's where the cutoff is. Really, to me, I would look at the code where they make you sprinkle it like
No, that's not what I'm asking though. I'm asking for how much vinyl are
Oh,
you going to
perc-
allow?
percentage.
Good.
But she said you gotta
Well, I think multifamily, if I understand where we're going with the rest of it, multifamily, I can understand where the cutoff is. It's a matter of updating the code so that it's clear. Would the plan commission be supportive of some kind of language, and I don't know how I would do this yet, some kind of language that would allow the plan commission to consider a modification for the incorporation of vinyl on a multifamily residential building that incorporated a certain percentage of affordable?
I would be open to that. Looking to do that. Deterrent. Many cases, when they build downtown, they keep the standards or they get the tax credits based on the rent. You know, you have to bring your cost per foot down.
So when you're trying to determine the single housing and how it, the definition of it, like for example, if I live in Oak Creek now and I want to move to Franklin, for example, isn't the definition of the single housing pretty much have to fit what's in Franklin, in Pleasant Prairie is different?
Every municipality has their own zoning code. Every municipality has their own definitions. We plagiarize from each other all the time, but every community sets the standards for what is right for their community, including what their definitions are, what their standards are. We just have to be in line with what the county plan is, and most of us don't have a problem with fitting in with that.
They're all Milwaukee County, we're still all,
Yeah,
Milwaukee
Sewer PAC
County.
has
Yes.
the jurisdiction on the countywide, well, it's not necessarily a countywide plan, it's a little bit bigger than that, but
Yeah.
regardless, we all have to fit in with that plan as well.
and is that much difference between, for example,
They're not,
Franklin?
they're not setting standards like we are. They only set standards for those municipalities that look to Sewer PAC as a consultant to actually make their own codes. So,
Everybody hold tight. Are we done with this one?
sure, if,
Okay.
if you're willing.
Everybody hold tight. I just gotta confer with Carrie. Okay, before we adjourn, we had held item 7B. Where we were reviewing the modifications for Hand and Stone on the windows. Unfortunately, the applicant had a situation that could not get him here on time. But I'm sorry, sir, because we took the action to hold, we cannot open it back up. But what we can do is we can get you back in here in 2 weeks and put you at the top of the agenda. How's that? I do apologize. Sorry to make you sit through this. But unfortunately, I cannot go back on that rule. Do appreciate you coming in, though. That will get us to adjournment, keep in mind it is Valentine's Day. Stores are still open, so if you didn't get a card or something, you better hurry.
Well, we're still here, so
Flowers might be picked over.
I don't.
For some
see
of
it,
you,
so-
there might be flowers waiting. Others, you may want to go pick them up. So, anyways,
John was asking.
Yeah, where's our can?
at the store. That is where I'm heading.
Okay, before I adjourn, I would like to mention that we have farmer's market has a pop-up indoor market. There's information on our kiosk out there. But the first one will be March 4th at Divine. And all the vendors who are at the market for the 2023 season will be selling indoor.
Keep in mind, if anybody's watching or streaming us, the Vine is located approximately 27th. Yeah, I think that is it. So,
Carrillo
if no
moves,
further business, adjournment.
Carrillo moves to adjourn at 8:22.
Clark seconds.
Roll call, Chris.
Guzekowski.
Oldani, aye.
Chandler, I.
And I.
Carrillo, aye.
Shinsky, aye.
Lorick, aye. David Chai. All right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, everybody. That was very helpful.